Welcome, everyone.
Welcome, listeners.
Before we move on to the main topic, let us introduce ourselves. My name is John Harvey Montenola from 11 USA.
And I am your co speaker for today, Irene C. Avellana, also from 11 A.
Before we jump on to the main discussion, let us first talk about the things that you may have experienced and put questions in your mind, wondering for some answers. First, have you experienced doing something normal that your friends, family, or neighbors have been doing a long time and you thought to be right but is wrong in some places or in some people? Have you thought that maybe your culture or the culture of others is inferior or superior to others? Let us find out. The effects of cultural relativism in the society. Culture is the way we live as humans. It encompasses beliefs, practices, values, attitude, laws, norms, artifacts, symbols, knowledge, and everything that a person leans and shares as a member of society. Cultural relativism is where one suspends one's cultural roots and understands by seeing another culture according to the standards of that culture. Although having a common culture is a way for us to coherently relate with one another, it is also important for us to open our eyes to the changes in our surroundings and to be able to adapt to them. Imagine a place where everyone thinks his or her own culture is superior to others. Of course, our perspective can help us understand why certain actions are considered right or wrong. Taking into the consideration the continuous change in different countries, our own country is taking its share in change as well. The Filipinos have taken the diverse cultures being brought to the Philippines rather well. Acknowledging, respecting, and beginning to understand others' cultural beliefs brings us closer together. Cultural relativism is the ability to understand a culture on its own terms and not to make judgment using the standards of one's own culture. Since the Philippines is a growing and developing country, we are open and very hospitable to foreign countries and are starting to adapt to those traditions. Although it is not ethical to judge a book by its cover, we must learn to politely reject or accept things that are no longer aligned to our moral values. Cultural relativism has made a huge impact and change in the Philippines that we are experiencing both the good and bad changes it has brought to us. The Philippines is changing and adapting, both for our benefit and a possible downfall. The mindset of the Filipinos right now, especially the younger generations, is to keep up with the trends and to climb the social ladder, not thinking if their actions are benefiting society. The issue of the younger generations is that they do not understand the true nature of cultural relativism, which is to bring people together by understanding and accepting differences of the diverse cultures. As the saying goes, change is good, and it has proven that it truly is good. By learning to accept and adapt to the different cultures brought upon the Philippines, we have become better than we were before. We are slowly changing for the survival of our country. Our nation is shifting, and this is due to the influence of other Asian and Western countries. Humanity is constantly changing, growing and developing, and when the concept of relativism is applied, it encourages the ability, capacity, and potential of people since there is no fixed standard as to what is morally right and wrong. It is based purely on a person's perspective.
Cultural relativism promotes cooperation in a system and it is visible in our nation already. The treaties and agreements made by the President of the Philippines is making a difference for our little country. We are making ties and are able to unite with countries much more capable than ours. Although we are different, we are able to form stronger bonds with others due to the different definition of success, which may lead to potential achievements. By embracing our differences, we are able to connect and understand each other better. It also creates a society where equality is possible and attainable. Cultural relativism has changed the right of women along the centuries and has allowed changes in the society. It has made a huge impact towards the educational system, political values, women's rights, social issues, and many more. It allows people to define themselves without contradicting the moral code of others. It encourages respect and understanding in a system. When people come from different cultures, they have to learn to adapt to one another in order to avoid offending anyone. And although they are adapting to one another, they are still distinguished as themselves since there is a clarity of who they are. A society can evolve and develop because there is an equal and pure level of respect for one another. And because of that respect, it creates a potentially judgment free society. People don't react because they find it wrong. They react because it is new to them. You do not receive judgment from others because the only person judging you is yourself. People who might disagree with you are those that have set their own standards for themselves. People change, culture change, humanity is constantly evolving, developing, and adapting. When cultural relativism is implemented, then the ability to evolve and adapt is encouraged because the definition of ethical and moral right and wrong can change as people change. Cultural relativism eliminates the rigidity that societies have in place regarding ethics, conduct, and reasoning. It also means that there are no actual definitions that are in place for a society. Cultural relativism promotes an individualistic perspective which governs how a person acts, thinks, and responds. Each person can set their own moralistic codes which they follow. There are positive effects of cultural relativism. First is, it is a system which promotes cooperation. For the most part, humanity is strong because of the differences we all have. Every individual has a different perspective that is based on their upbringing, experiences, and personal thoughts. By embracing the many differences we have, the cooperation creates a potential in a stronger society. Each individual definition of success allows us to pursue stronger bonds with one another and potentially achieve more because there are no limitations from a group level in what can or cannot be accomplished. Second, it creates a society where equality is possible. In any society, people rise by climbing on top of other people. It is a socially acceptable way of creating discrimination. We see this today in wage gap that women face, the educational opportunities that minority groups face, and the violence we see because of political oppression. Cultural relativism allows the individual to define their moral code without defining the moral code of others. Each person is separate in such a society. That separation creates equality because each person can set their own definition of success. Third, respect is encouraged in a system of cultural relativism. People come from different cultures, they have different ideas, they pursue different definitions of success. Because such a system promotes the individual's definition instead of a group definition, a society can evolve because there is a natural level of respect built into the process. Each person is naturally given the right to pursue life through their own specific perspective and then learn from their experiences in a way that works best for them. Fourth, cultural relativism creates a society without judgment. We are so trained to judge others in today's world that we don't even give it a second thought. Looking at someone and saying, "Glad that isn't me," is a judgment. Under the theory of cultural relativism, judgment goes away. The only person that judges you is yourself. People who might disagree with you are able to set their own codes and standards for their own individualistic bubble. Instead of worrying about others, you only worry about yourself. Lastly, it stops cultural conditioning. People tend to adopt their attitudes, thoughts, and beliefs to the people they are with on a regular basis. This is cultural conditioning and it prevents people from having an individualistic perspective. Cultural relativism stops this.
There are so many positive possibilities that cultural relativism has to offer, but it also has a negative side to it that can cause a country's downfall. Cultural relativism could cause chaos. Since there is no fixed standard for moral ethics, it becomes harder to judge what is right or wrong. If your moral ethics says it is all right to do bad things, then it becomes hard to question someone's moral code. Even if the law states that it is bad to do this, but you find it in your moral code that it is right, what could possibly stop you from committing that act? In this scenario, there is no hard-bound way to protect the members of the society. That makes the society a battle for the strongest to emerge on top. With that, it limits moral progress by holding people back because it is reflected in the laws and customs of the culture. It limits the progress of humanity. If you take away the capability to judge one moral standard to the other, or simply comparing a new culture to an old one, then the definition of good and bad becomes uncertain. A country's definition of success is no longer valid because each is successful in its own way. The differences of the cultures in terms of its takes on issues and problems cannot be judged since they have separate beliefs of what is right and wrong. So, in this perspective, cultural relativism is either good or bad for a society to prosper. Depending on how cultural relativism has affected the people, it can change a country for its own good or it can bring a country with suffering. Moral standards make sense in a person's culture by creating individualized cultures on singular or larger scales. It does become easier to keep and embrace the tradition that humanity has developed over the millennia. The best way to adapt to the changes it brings is to simply bring awareness to the public and to the upcoming generations in order to promote understanding as early as possible. So these are the negative effects of cultural relativism in our society. First, it creates a system that is fueled by personal bias. Every society has a certain natural bias to it because of how humanity operates. People tend to prefer to be with others who have similar thoughts and feelings, so they segregate themselves into neighborhoods, communities, and social groups that share specific perspectives. When people are given the power to define their own moral code, then they will do so based on their own personal bias. There is no longer a group perspective. People follow their own code at the expense of others. Second, it would create chaos. People who can follow their own moral code because there is no wrong or right would be allowed to pursue any life they preferred under the theory of cultural relativism. If you're upset with your neighbor, then you can kill that person without consequence if your moral code allows for murder. Instead of purchasing something, you could steal it if you see stealing as right to do. There's no real way to protect people in such a society, so each person becomes responsible to protect themselves. It creates a system that is Darwinian in a practicality, where only the strongest can survive. Third, it is an idea that is based on the perfection of humanity. Many people strive to do good every day. Most want to see everyone have the chance to pursue happiness in some way. That is why the idea of cultural relativism often seems to be inviting. The only problem is that people are not perfect. We can be forgetful. We can lie. We can become aggressive when a driver cuts you off while driving and puts your family at risk. Without a group moral code in place to govern decisions, anything could happen when we experience these moments of imperfection. It could limit humanity's progress. We often think of the concept of cultural relativism as progression, but it isn't necessarily that way. When you remove the ability to judge one standard from another, then the comparative process of placing a current society or culture against the past one is removed as well. We might consider the ability for women to vote as the right thing to do today. But in past societies, not allowing women to vote was also right from a cultural standpoint. Because both are right, there's no way to judge progress. Lastly, the fifth one, it draws people away from one another. Although cultural relativism can promote people coming together to share their strengths, it can also encourage people to draw apart from one another. C.S. Lewis, in his description of hell from the Screwtape Letters, envisions a place where people are constantly going away from each other to avoid the demons that each person has. Because each person is uncertain of what codes and standards another is following, the natural inclination for self-preservation causes people to draw away. You might develop a close-knit community at first, but as Lewis describes, each demon causes people to back away from one another instead of coming closer. And that is all from the negative effects of the cultural relativism in our society.